Okay, so welcome everyone to In Conversation. I'm here with Leslie Zelamsky, and we're recording this for Hawkins Art and Artists, which can be seen on my YouTube channel at Hawkins Art and Artists 4279. Today we're talking with Leslie Zelamsky, a painter and sculptor working in Boston, Massachusetts. And for transparency's sake, Leslie and I met way back in, 89. We were both MFA graduate students at the Maryland Institute and College of Art. And I thought her work was great back then, and it's great now. And I really did want to, every time I see it, I want to tell more people about her work. So while we're talking, there'll be a PowerPoint with images will be rolling, and they are the dates or year in which they were made are noted at the top of each set of slides. And after we begin our discussion, then we'll focus on the slides, talk about the work, and then go back to questions. It's so good to see you again. I think people should know it's been like between grad school and recently, it's been about 30 years
Yeah.
since we even spoke to each other. And it's really just like yesterday. So
Mhm.
it's really terrific to be here with you.
You
Um,
as well.
so right away, I'd like you to tell, us about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, how long, when did you first know you wanted to make art or sculpture at all?
Okay. Well, before I begin, I just wanted to thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited about it. So where I grew up, Brooklyn, New York. So born in 1965 and started really working, God, probably when I was 10, 11 years old. And I remember I was in middle school and I had to write an essay about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I wrote about being a veterinarian. But in that, in that paper were tons and tons of drawings. And I remember my teacher at the time said, you know what? Forget about being a vet. You need to be an artist. And yeah. So I started taking a lot of, outside classes, Brooklyn Museum Art School, Parsons School of Design, all kinds of things in and around the city, which gave me great exposure, of course. Um, and I was just on that trajectory towards going to art school. So for undergrad school, I went to Cooper Union and then took a few years off in between. I did a few residencies. And then I applied to the Maryland Institute, and that's where I got my master's.
So is anybody else in your family, interested in the arts other, for themselves?
So my brother is extremely interested. He looks at art all the time, travels to see art. He's not an artist in terms of practicing a practicing artist. Um, and then from my grandfather always worked with his hands. He was a glazer,
Mm.
um, a glass shop. And so I remember being there really, really young and being so impressed with what he was able to do. Um, and then I also heard that I had an aunt who had died before I was even born, who was an artist, lives in Colorado. I don't know much about her work or much about her. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
so it's in the genes there somewhere, right?
yeah. And I was very fortunate in having a set of parents that always encouraged, always supported, always encouraged, took me to Pearl Paint, on
Yeah.
King Street. My dad used to drive me to the Brooklyn Museum when I was too young to travel on my own. So it was my, working and, pursuing this has always been very encouraged.
Well, that's the most important thing, isn't it? Genes
Yeah.
or not, it's having supportive parents and friends
Right.
around you.
Yes.
So, before we look at the slides, what kind of themes do you address in your practice? Does what you like to focus on vary? Is there one or two specific narratives that you embrace in your work?
Yes, so this has been a great exercise for me in really like looking back at my history and my work from long time ago, and seeing a lot of continuity. It really kind of became very apparent as I was doing this, working on this presentation. And I've always thought, in terms of my own being as well, about isolation, boundaries, separation, segregation, um, and issues around those things. Um, in terms of my work, in terms of the sculpture, I've generally always built, added, um, and constantly layering, 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 and that enters into the painting as well. So whether I am building a piece or working on a painting, um, there's a lot of process and history, adding, removing, and um, going back and forth between those two things. I wouldn't say, I think my earlier work was much more direct in terms of content. Um, Now I'm into more of an abstract way of working, but there's still so many similarities in terms of repetition, repetition, repetition.
Wow. I mean, I think this will be exciting for everyone to see at some point because, yes. So, when I looked at the 50 or so slides that you sent to me, I totally could see the continuity. There are years where seems to be a little disjuncture between that current work and then what came next. And but there's always this like sort of, recapturing parts of what you did in the past and moving it forward, reevaluating it for uh the present, as it were. So this, I'm starting with one of the pieces from this year, and because I know what's to come, I feel like this is a great question. How did, Leslie Zelamsky arrive here at Convergence 4, a wall piece made of shims, wood, nails, paint, and incredibly abstract, but still has the feel of a painting
Hmm.
because of the, way you have like sort of manipulated the surface with, even though it's minimal, there is still using the color of the wood and some application of some kind of uh, paint-like material. So
Yeah.
here we're beginning with 1991. I'm so this is right a little bit after finishing graduate school,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So this piece was what? This was, where is this and what is this?
This
52.
is, yes, this was in a show that Kelly Jones had curated for School 33 Art Center. And it began in graduate school, and I completed it as a resident artist at School 33. So I was very fortunate in graduate school, being at the Mount Royal School of Art, because it was completely open. Um, and there was no kind of like, you have to do sculpture, photography, painting, mixed media. It was basically whatever you wanted to do. So I started just seeing myself move more and more into sculpture. It originated my desire to start making sculpture. Having been more of a painter at Cooper Union, I was really enjoying the process of building my panels for painting. And one day, I thought to myself, well, I'm really into making these panels. Maybe I should go beyond that, and I was studying sculpture as well, but really focused in painting. So at the Maryland Institute, I was really kind of very free and open to, that transition. So in terms of the work itself, like this piece here, and in work that you'll see, more current work, I'm very interested in architecture. Internal space, outside space, and really working with the material to allow it to be what it is while applying my own hand to it as well. And striking that balance in terms of, you know, this is what I'm seeing, but this is what the material wants to do, and acceptance of both, and really bringing them together. This piece particularly, for me, was my first, really big, substantial installation. Um, and what I might like most about this piece is actually the spaces in between, those spaces of, in each tower that I didn't cut into. It's how I placed the material, but that the material being like common building, wood, furniture strips, shingles, all that stuff. I like to use it as well because it relates to my interests in architecture, in commonplace type of structures. So this is kind of where it began.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting because it's like you went from the hard to soft with the rope. So, how did this come about? This is the same year.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, I mean, and these are pretty monumental, so how did you, I mean, what intrigued you about making such large scale works?
Yeah. So this piece was part of my graduate thesis show. It came about during the installation of the show. It was not a preconceived piece. And there was this space in the gallery that, um, I just wanted something there, but I wanted, I was thinking about all these ideas about separation, and division. And so that's where this came from. At the same time, while we have this kind of like these absolute concepts of separation, and division, isolation, um, the softness of it for me kind of like allowed entry into a more hard stance on something.
Hmm.
So it's more organic, more feminine, and um, so this was really, and I had it was just hard because I had, you know, get it really tight and all of that stuff. So although it was conceived for the graduate show, it was as important, that the entire installation worked together.
Right. Let me, I would like to, where's the slideshow? Okay. Play from Sarah current slide. Okay, so let me pause it here. So this batons, I read about it in your one of your statements, where you give a synopsis of each group. So did this have any was there a response to some political event, or just a rumination on, peace and violence?
Mhm. So these these batons, I actually got them from a military surplus facility in Maryland. I used to frequent there a lot, and there was this massive amount of these things, and there's so much history in them because these were used, and there's names on them, and the different officers, different, different soldiers, or they braided their braids very carefully, and carved in special things into the batons, and yet look at what they're used for,
Yeah.
so um the reason I constructed them like this is, first of all, back to that kind of, minimalist simplicity that I was very interested in and still am. But when it came together, I thought about it, this is just stacked. So the idea of like the decision, the choice someone makes, with how they come to something, it's just stacked. People could have just taken these things and, violence could have erupted, or lay down your arms,
Mhm.
so in terms of like social political issues, that's basically where I was coming from.
So this is 1992, and this is like an inside outside kind of, and very apparently architectural. Let me go. And and it's pretty big.
Yes.
And so I try to picture you making these giant, these like huge pieces, and labor intensive. Did you have any help doing these, or you just
Yeah. So this piece was originally in an exhibition I was invited to called Confinements. It was curated by Andrea Polan down at University of Maryland. Um, and it was actually inside at first. No help with it at all. But I was much younger then and stronger, and I didn't have arthritis. So, so this was all created on my own. Now, the way it's made is, for practicality purposes, it's made in sections. The horizontal pieces lay on top of each other, and then they're nailed together on site. Um, and the cross pieces as well, they're just laid up and nailed down. So
Mhm.
very much like, even though it was inside space, in an inside space at first, the idea of how it related to architecture um, it really is a strong presence in this piece. And then the reason I showed this version of it at Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass, was the connection to that building you see in the background, you know. Um,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. So taking that kind of material that's used to create that kind of building, but putting it into an installation.
yeah. Wow. So here we're jumping to 2013, taking for granted that life happens, so and so this is reintegration. And what does that mean? What do you mean by that for this piece?
It's exactly what you just said. It's about re-entering into, I had a child, stuff happens, as you were saying, and this was probably the first piece I made that really brought me back into my arts practice. So reintegrating back into that world.
Yeah, it's very dynamic, the curves in it. I like the way you've cut into it. And those marks themselves seem to have some kind of meaning uh, that is layered into this sort of geometric form that's, changes between like rectangles and circles. I mean, I see, that shape encompassing much, a kind of geometry, so and even the cuts in it reinforce that notion. So but are these also, these are cedar shakes, so
Yeah.
how are they different from shims?
Well, shims are traditionally those narrow pieces that we use inside to level walls and things like that, or to level a table, you know,
Yeah.
that's shaking. These are more roofing, used in
Oh,
roofing as underlayment. Um, the thing about this piece that really, this was the start of using this kind of material. And this is a great example of how I work with respect to what the material is. Shims by nature are angled, they're cut at an angle. So these curves and forms formed because of the way this material it comes, Um, and it was really kind of like, in a lot of ways, up to those angles to create what this became. But then those cuts in, actually, these were built spaces. So I didn't cut into the work after it was done. The work was built and the spaces evolved from the way I
mm-hmm.
positioned them. Yeah, so for me, this is like a real pinnacle work for me because of the use of the material, the labor involved. Also, it's the start of, well, how do I work on a smaller scale? Just dealing with the physical limitations that I started to get, to
Yeah.
have. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like that when describing what a shake is, and I can see it now, um, that because of the way it's manufactured informed the way that you used it.
Mm-hmm.
And that you came up with this particular configuration, this shape. Um, it gives the whole sculpture a sense of, that it means something more than its materials.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a very, I mean, I have to say one more time, your work is extremely dynamic. And yes, it's labor intensive, but its true value is in the way in which you uh, approach the your practice, approach your materials, the way in which you think about it, think about what you're doing. I understand that there's sort of a spontaneity, there's intuitiveness, and, but it feels also very thoughtful, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So moving on. All right, there are probably a few more paintings here than I needed, but I am in love with these paintings. So, I mean, really. So here we are, it's 2014. And next is a couple of paintings. They each Solus. Um, I don't know if that became a series that you did a number of them, but it's sort of, I'm not sure, the beginning of a new painting episode, because you have also uh this painting. Could you pronounce that? Aika?
Ayeka.
Ayeka.
Yes.
And could you say what that means?
Yes. So Ayeka is a Hebrew word that is asking the question of where you are, where somebody is. And it's not literally asking that question like where they are in a room or in the world. It's a very metaphysical, spiritual word, how you carry yourself in the world, um, how you contribute to the world, um, and um, how you basically what you bring to humanity, to nature, to everything, and where you stand there. And is it a contribution? Are you contributing? Are you not contributing? So that's the question that's asked, is where am I? Where is somebody? Um, this group of work from these paintings from 2014, 2015, I went through an unexpected divorce, and it was a tough time. Um, and the studio was where I found that other painting, solace. That's where I found my solitude, my calm. It was very, very, very important part of my existence at that point. So this Ayeka piece, this was definitely a series of paintings. Solace came before that, and I have a few others that relate to that. But then I started getting a little bit more heavy, drippy, um, as you can see, that kind of thing, as opposed to Solace, which is really about it's much more airy, lighter, layering, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And you could still see, you see, this work here easily relates to my sculptures. You could even see traces of that tower that was
Yeah.
from this 33 towers. It's always in there somewhere.
So are these paintings on canvas or on wood panels?
These are on panels, and I prefer panels because it really allows me, there are no limitations when it comes to a panel. I could scrape, I could grind, I could, you know, and apply other things. All of these are on panels. And I also just like that hardness in terms of the way it feels applying the paint. Whereas, I've painted on canvas plenty. That's also a panel. But for me, it has too much give to it. I really
Yeah.
like that part, you know?
So the wood is always there. It's just,
Hmm.
when it takes center stage. And sometimes it's in the background, and sometimes it takes center stage. I love
Yes.
these paintings. They are so complex in, their mark making. I mean, never mind their narratives, right? But as a painting, they're complex. There's so much in them. There's nuance. Terrific. So this is
Thanks.
one of the series of for Sarah. And um,
Hmm.
do we need to know about Sarah?
No,
No,
not
right.
necessarily. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I want to just also say that when I'm painting, it starts at that panel building. That
Yeah.
for me, the entire thing that I'm putting out there matters. So it's and I think that is the sculptural side of me, as
Right.
that comes into it. So the process of building something for the painting is very important to me.
Yeah, I mean, even who people who build their own canvases, it's like, yeah, the painting begins with deciding what size this is, what's my
Mhm.
support mechanism, how am I putting this together? Yeah. Oh, wait. This is okay. I think there's this painting and there's I think the next it should be what remains is next. I mean, look at this. This also has a slight allusion to a landscape. So,
Mhm.
and is this literal leftovers or metaphorical leftovers? It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. There's like light in there, back in the background. There's this highly textured surface. I mean, you even use the sawdust here in the painting. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you. It's literally leftovers from objects in my marriage. Yeah. So in terms of the material, I mean, it goes beyond that, but
Mhm.
there are things in there. in what remains also, you know, that's kind of where it started.
All right, so here though, I totally see I feel like I can see what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what remains, yes, it's like sawdust and it's you know, oil, it's very textured, but it also alludes to those shims, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in the central area where it appears that there's like pillars to shims or whatever, right? It's this
Yep.
verticality that is repeated across the surface. So also, I love it. I mean,
Thank you.
sorry to keep saying that.
And where these this work, this especially this piece connects for me to my sculptures is that solidity and weight is extremely important to me. You know, building the structure, whether it's two-dimensional, three-dimensional, that kind of heavy groundedness, certainty, you know, in terms of just the physicality. So whether it's painting or sculpture, that physicality in the work is really important.
All right, so here we are, 2016, and we're back. I mean, like, as far as I could tell, we're back to making sculpture, and there's a variety of types. It's not like series oriented at this point. And let's go back. So time's up. There's like I had two slides of works from this uh year, and I love that it's sort of a totemic, which is always like a form that I, you know, really appreciated even before you know, myself became a painter, you know, thinking of Pacific Northwest Indians, and some African sculptures. So the shape and form of this piece. What can you say anything about that? Because I mean, uh, it seems like it has a sort of anthropomorphic quality at the same time that it signifies, you know, some sort of, it does signify something beyond the figure, even though it's kind of reminiscent of it.
Yeah, so this piece is a it was made from parts of my sculptures that I cut off. Um, and it's funny because the way it turned out, I really do love it. It was first just a study. You know, I was just kind of like playing around in the studio with these different parts that I had around. Um, it's funny because yes, I see the figure in it, but I didn't see it I don't generally think about the figure in my work. But yeah, I see that. So once again, it has, like you said, totemic, you know, it has that certain kind of like you know, structural groundedness while it's very light, delicate, and precarious, actually. These pieces are literally stacked. Even though, you know, there's sections, they're big sections that are stacked. So, but once again, you know, playing around, this became um, you know, and worked around a series of sculptures that I was doing. Um, and I really like the lower part of it, very important to me that, well, you know, physically it needed to have that. I'm not I'm not into pedestals with sculpture at all. Um, I come from a tradition where, like, once what I said about my paintings on panels, that the panel's important. So um I don't think I have any work at all that I mean, this is a tall piece anyway, but that would sit on a pedestal. That pedestal has to, for me, present
Right.
as importantly as the piece. Yeah.
Well, let me apologize for the sound. I'm on the 12th floor. The windows are closed, but you can still hear New York City out there. I'm very sorry about that.
It's
Um,
okay.
One of the reasons I included this is because in my, as much as your sculpture is terrific, I'm always looking for the evidence of the painter in you.
Mhm.
So, and I put this in here to illustrate how one view of this piece seems somewhat monochromatic and a minimal, and then another view of this piece has, you know, the this, I'll say, a kind of coloration that to me is reminiscent of the some of the paintings we saw earlier, like Solace or What Remains or whatever, on the edges of the wood. So I mean that's why I put it in there, because there's the that two-dimensional, event that happens at the same time in these three-dimensional works of yours. So
Yes. It's very, painting is, that's my roots, that's where
yeah,
and so my sculpture, and that's what I'm really feeling in my current work, like the marriage of those two things. And I feel that even in the work that doesn't have a lot of paint in it, um, there's a lot of painterly sensibilities
yeah,
in the work.
absolutely. All right, now the next few pieces are from the dwelling series, and I take it that this is one of the first ones.
Yes.
And you can see here are, so I don't know, these are all on panels. So we've already established that you do their paintings on wood panels. So this one, where is it? This is actual where the panels have become present. So is this one first, or
Yes.
are the other these? So these are second. I mean,
Right.
they follow that one.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's okay. So let's look at this. It seems much more controlled. It's made of the same materials, shims, nails, charcoal. It has color. It's like a painting. It presents as a painting, but then there's all the wood in there, which is um, that area's the color's kind of minimal. It's very organized. And then you go from this to this. I love it. It's so you just sort of like, it's not like, letting go, it's being free, right?
Mhm.
So what so dwelling is obviously about places to live, homes and the like. What else would you have us know about it?
Yeah. So in this work, it's the definition is twofold, right? Dwelling, in terms of home, place, that kind of dwelling. But a big part of me is thinking and overthinking, and repeat. So dwelling on something, I tend to have a mind that dwells a lot. And it makes sense within my process, that they're very much connected. Um, so that's, and then, the fact that like a dwelling as a home, as a place relates to the architectural side. And then the more, mindful side about, just kind of being in your head. And the process of, especially in the pieces, that have a lot more layers and layers and layers, um, about that idea. Like, well, we're thinking a lot, but also I am working in terms of the way my pieces arrive, like reintegration, that curved piece, you know, there's a lot of dwelling on that. There's a lot of labor. So that's how I arrived at this title for this series of work.
Okay, so the next few paintings, there's our point of departure, and you begin with the paintings, and then you move into the sculpture. These are also quite lovely. And so my favorite, I don't know if it's because it's red, I don't know. It's so point of departure signifies what to you?
So that is multi-layered. It's leaving a lot of things behind, not everything, but making changes in my life, in my arts practice, um, focus, being more dedicated to it, more focused, being in the studio more. So departing those old ways, those
Mm.
older and kind of bringing back the much older ways. Um, and it also does follow the whole thing that happened with my ex-husband and that piece, his point of departure, which turned out to be a really a really good thing for me.
Yeah. Great for all of us. So yeah, I'm just gonna let people see like how you from the painting to the sculpture. It's so I mean, really, it's just sort of uh so interesting how, like, to me, the paintings, point of departure, are right, entirely very expressive in mark making and color, content, the whole thing. But when you get to the sculpture, it's more static, it's more minimal, and um, I just, find it extremely interesting how you move from these, different materials and get such incredibly different kinds of results
Mhm.
that they both seem like different bodies of work because of the resulting objects.
Mhm.
So here we are. It's 2023, and you're revisiting dwelling.
Yeah.
Thinking again, rethinking. I love that. I mean, it's only, in the last 2 years or so that I myself went noticed things that I did, 30, 25, 30 years ago and said, oh, let me look at that. And it's very exciting to uh, have a new look at something you did so long ago. And the results of that obviously is very different than it had been. So why did you go back to this series?
So the the shims and the shakes and this way of working really resonated with me. I love to paint, I love to look at paintings. Um, but this material really is the softness of it, really, I just love love this material. And it allowed me to be okay with that mindset of thinking and thinking and thinking, because I realized that, hey, something really great could come out of that also, Um, and I just felt like I wasn't finished, I
Yeah,
just felt like I took that little kind of like point of departure in those paintings, but dwelling had just begun, and I found myself picking up these materials again.
terrific. All right, this is now leading us to your current work, which is again a really great convergence of painting and sculpture. It's highly three-dimensional, though it's on the wall. And, you know, and also your use of the charcoal and paint to really accentuate, I guess, in some ways, the surfaces that you've gotten by the way that you put different the wood together. I'm going to let these roll again because they're terrific. And they are just so convergence, is that part of this title, the paint and the sculpture, or is there something else we need to take away from this work?
It's really, the title is what it is. It's about that merging of these two disciplines. And the first time I work, the sculpture's on the wall, and for me, like this body of work, I'm kind of in love with it,
Yeah, I'm in love with it.
um, and this is just the beginning,
Yeah. Yeah,
I,
there's so much more you can do with this, right? Never mind this, increasing the scale. And you in my mind, you're in the same register as Ursula von Rodingsford and what's his name? I forgot his name. He shows also at Gallery Lalong. I love his work. I love hers. Every time I see it, I go, oh yeah. And so how you see this as like a significant ongoing project?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, very much. Although the current piece I'm working on, the series title is changing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I'm
Okay.
ready to take that step. Um, yeah, this work to me is just like it's like the culmination of all of that other work, you
Yeah.
know, it's very present in those paintings, you know.
Yes,
So
absolutely. I know you said because I asked you why, you know, why you included the paintings, and after I really looked at them, I totally understood they were completely part of the whole evolution, and I could see the wood pieces in there. So really great. So as an artist who works through abstraction, I mean, I sort of asked you this in a different way, but how does your practice comment on, current social or political issues? I mean, besides, we're talking about, the batons, and do you feel a compulsion to like refer to real life in your work?
um the more obvious work that you just mentioned, like batons, the fence pieces, all of those are that's there's a lot of obvious connections there. Um, uh, as the work has evolved into abstraction, I wouldn't say um, that the work itself or the intent has any in terms of the image, there's anything necessarily political about it. But I am a woman. I am using power tools. There's the contrast of the the strength of the material and what it takes to actually make these things, right?
Mhm.
Combined with the very organic or very, very organic, more feminine, qualities of the work. So I think just by making what I make and doing what I do, I'm taking a feminist stance. It doesn't
Right.
have to be didactic. This is the way I do. This is what I do because, I'm a woman, I'm a feminist. That really, for me, doesn't exist in the work.
Right. Okay. That makes sense to me. And so in that way, you can say that you reference gender. in identity because of the oppositional ideas of power tools and
Right.
women and or femininity versus what kind of masculinity, and that in effect masculinity itself doesn't resonate because anyone with the will can make use of tools and any tools. So
Mhm.
yeah, I totally that's always something to remember, because not a lot. There are plenty of women sculptors, and some of them are, using clay, some are using power tools. So it's what I say is like it's making abstract work is always an act of resistance.
Mhm.
Basically the status quo, because basically, I I won't go anywhere. That's enough. Which artist do you think influenced you the most over the course of your
Yeah.
career?
So some favorites, and as I was looking back, this felt so good to me. Back in 1989, I was working at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, which is a fabulous museum. Um, and I taught there, and I was also an art installer. And one of the very first shows I installed was a show of African American sculptures, contemporary sculptors, sorry. And God, to unwrap this work and touch it and be with it, and I didn't know anything about it, was so powerful. So from that, Martin Perrier,
Oh
he's like
gosh, yeah.
he is Martin Perry is just it for me. And since then I heard him spoke, a few times in person, and just as I've watched his work evolve. Maren Hassinger
Oh,
was also in
yeah.
that show and definitely resonates with me. You mentioned Ursula von Risingvard. I can't pronounce her name. Ridingsvard. Um, Obviously very much in my work. Ellen Sui, I love his work. And from further back, for me, like kind of what started this, Jackie Windsor, Jackie Ferrara,
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah, painters, Anselm Kiefer, and
Oh
you know,
gosh,
straight,
yeah.
yeah, and straight painter, Joan Mitchell.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I can see it all. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can see it all. So that's fantastic. I mean, and part of what we do, right, is to provide a foothold for the future, like to be inspired. We've been inspired, and we hope that our work inspires, the
yeah,
artist.
yeah.
So, um, so what strategies or have you identified any strategies that aided in your development of your career? I mean, or like what is a vision for your practice and how do you define success?
Yeah. So, uh, up until recently, I would consider myself more, a regional artist. When I was in Maryland after grad school, I showed a lot all over that region, DC, Virginia, Maryland, Baltimore, that whole area. Um, and when I moved up here, I got involved up here, and since then I've shown in various museums and galleries up here. And I am a definite I'm a perfectionist with myself, not necessarily with other people, but me. And um, I feel super ready now. I feel like my work has come to a place where I feel that I could put it out there on a bigger level, to a broader audience, and that it has that kind of power and strength. And um, until recently, I didn't feel that necessarily. Plus, I was so immersed in making the work that it's kind of, it's hard to kind of balance those two things. Um,
Yeah.
and just the amount of work because it takes so long for me to make one piece. My goal was, let's make a body of work here, that can be presented. So I definitely feel worthy at this point, to really kind of get my work out there. In terms of where I see myself going, um, I'd like to be in a more, a national scene, international scene. Um, and I feel that the work is deserving of it. And I don't know where it's going to go. I know right now that I'm not done with convergence or that type of work. Where
Right,
it goes from there, I have no idea. I'm very fortunate because I've dealt with a lot of physical problems, arthritis and back problems and all of that. And just a week before I was supposed to have knee surgery, I realized, hey, I'm doing much better. I have exercised, lost a lot of weight. And so now it's just like that transformation has allowed me to really get into what's important to me, the physicality and the process of building the work.
right,
Uh, I'm unhampered, except when the work gets too big and I need help moving it.
right,
You know? Um,
right. Yeah,
I have that just physical strength at this point. The will is one thing, but now I have the physical ability as well. I mean, I was using a wheelchair for quite a while. I wasn't really
wow.
able to walk.
I am so happy that you took control.
Yes,
Yeah.
me
I
too.
mean, it just shows you when we take control that, we can radically change our lives. They don't have to be one of longing and loss, right?
Right,
So,
absolutely.
so do you use social media at all? Do you find it
Yes.
helpful?
Yeah, I use Instagram, on Facebook, Instagram. I've really increased my presence on Instagram, which
Mhm.
feels very good. It's opened me up to a lot of things just in terms of awareness of what's going on with shows and calls and that kind of thing. In this area, I've been a member of an artist-run gallery called Fountain Street. That's been really a wonderful experience for me. Um, and I've been in group shows, solo shows, that kind of thing in this area, in basically in New England, I'd say.
Right. Well, I predict and I believe that your audience will is going to expand to those national and international venues and audiences. I predict it's overdue. So also, I would like everyone to know you can visit Leslie's website at www.lesliezelamsky.com. That's Zelamsky. I've written her name 100 times and I had to. All right. Well, thank you, Leslie, for spending time with me and
Thank
sharing your work. Um, I will
you.
definitely be in touch. Please feel free to use this video however you wish in support of your work, and I will share it as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, Cynthia.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it. It's